Hi, my name is Victoria Wilson, and I have been a birth doula in Central Kentucky for the last 10 years. I am closing my doula business and heading to nursing school because my ultimate goal is to be a nurse midwife. But in the meantime, I still plan to use my website, my social media that I've created just for community benefit. I want to give you great information about birth, postpartum, and help you still navigate the environment that we live in, the medical environment, community hospital birth, whatever your plan is to have a baby, I want you to be equipped so you have the happiest, healthiest birth possible. So with that, I'm going to run through a little presentation I've made. It is up to date as of March 2026 on where to birth in the Bluegrass. There have been a lot of changes in Central Kentucky that I have seen over the last 10 years. So I put together a little guide as you decide where's the best place to have your baby. So let's get started. This is kind of a near and dear project to my heart. Where to have your baby in the Bluegrass. I know a lot of families really wrestle with this decision. What's the best hospital? Should I have a home birth? Is there a birth center? Where am I going to have the best birth for me? And the answer to that question is really unique. So again, like I said, my name is Victoria. I have been a birth doula in this area for the last 10 years. I'm heading to nursing school with the ultimate goal of being a nurse midwife, and I am really passionate about helping people navigate birth, especially navigate the medical system if that's where you choose to have your baby. And I just want to see healthy birth practices in all places. So let's get going. Quick disclaimer, this resource is my own. It was created on my own time as a doula. I do not speak for any type of employer or entity. Also, all of this information is publicly available, not sharing any revolutionary secrets. I'm just putting a bunch of information and context together to help you begin a conversation with your family, with your providers on what's going to be the best plan for you. I also really want to thank Anna Chamberlain and Monica Klaus with the Kentucky Department of Health, as well as Melissa Breen. She is an RN. And again, the Kentucky Department of Health kind of public report they put out on procedures. So okay, why would you care about your birth options? You may have a lot of personal reasons, and as I go through this information, I just want you to keep that in mind. Maybe you're aware of our maternal health crisis in America, and you want to avoid some bad outcomes. You want to protect yourself and your family's health. Maybe you are just thinking about the memory of birth. Maybe you have certain histories or certain perceptions of birth, and you want your birth to be positive. Maybe you're trying to be trauma informed. Maybe you have a lot of anxiety and you just really want to know what's going on. Whatever your personal reasons are for being careful about your birth planning, keep those in mind as you plan and as you make decisions, make them with that in mind. I think that the more you can keep your big goal in mind, the more informed your care team will be as to how to take care of you and the happier you're going to be ultimately with your birth. So, what does birth look like in Kentucky? Well, I do just want to say that as of 2026, I've seen a lot of really positive trends in Kentucky. I've seen some hospitals add some options like inflatable birth tubs. I've seen them expand those options to say people on Pitocin or continuous monitoring. I've seen other hospitals invite doulas to the table to say, help us be a better place to have a baby. I've seen hospitals invite doulas to come speak to their providers about doula care and about other options that families might be wanting in birth compared to the kind of technocratic medical industrial complex norm. And I think that's all really positive. So bearing that in mind, here's kind of where we sit. As of 2023, there's about 3.5 million births each year in the US. We have about a nationwide 33% cesarean rate, and just under half of all births in the US are paid by Medicaid. So in Kentucky, we actually have a slightly higher birth rate per 1,000 women, 60 births per 1,000. We have a 33% cesarean rate, and closer to that half of births are being paid out by Medicaid. So Kentucky having a few more babies than the national average, and Medicaid is paying for a few more of those births than the national average. Our cesarean, so the NT-SV cesarean rate, that would be the low risk cesarean rate. That would mean it's someone's first baby. They have a full-term pregnancy. They're pregnant with just one baby, and that one baby is head down. That is statistically the lowest risk person to have a C-section. Um, there was an initiative, Healthy People 2020, that has since been updated to Healthy People, a C-section rate of 23%. You can see we're still kind of this low risk cesarean rate. We're still kind of hovering above that 26%, as you're going to see in a little bit. Some facilities just overall have more cesareans than others. But of course, another good way to think about cesarean rate is like, who is the lowest risk person? Are we keeping low risk healthy moms low risk and healthy? Or is something happening to them that's been making them high risk and need a cesarean when they otherwise would not have had one? And also, as we go through these stats, keep in mind, stats are only one part of the story. There is a lot that goes into healthcare, there's a lot that goes into individual choices, there's a lot that might go into a labor. So bear these stats in mind. And again, you use this presentation, you're going to get this handout we go through, take it to your provider, discuss how, help me understand these numbers. What are your particular provider or practice rates of cesarean or vaginal birth or induction or what have you? Ask for some context, but having said that, stats are also really important. They do help us understand the whole, but it's just part of that story. So where are you going to have your baby? Until this 2025, you really could only have a baby in a hospital or at home. We did have some legislation passed in 2025 that opened the doorway for birth centers in Kentucky. There is not one as yet. However, I do know they're coming. So it's very exciting. There's also been a notable increase in home birth, hospital birth, community birth, you might say, in the nation since 2020. It makes sense. COVID kind of forced a lot of people to think outside of the system. We don't want to run into hospitals if we don't need to be there. And so that did kind of increase the interest in giving birth outside of a hospital system. That certainly happens in Kentucky too. So about 51,000 babies in Kentucky each year are born in the hospital, and about 1,000 of those are going to be, in a home setting, and very soon probably a birth center too. But still, majority are going to be in a hospital. But even with hospitals, that's a tough story. A couple years ago in Hazard, which is around here, their labor and delivery center closed. And actually, just as of this past month, February 2026, we got word that the Stanford labor and delivery unit, the kind of famous birthing spa in Stanford, will be closed until further notice. This is due to some Medicaid cuts that have come down over the last year through some political decisions, which is really unfortunate, I think. If you look at this map, not a lot of places have a baby if you live in central Kentucky. And especially think about these folks who might be traveling from smaller towns. Maybe they have a hospital or some sort of outpatient clinic, urgent care, but they don't have primary prenatal care. They don't have a place to have a baby. That's a big deal. So these are kind of the big players are going to be looking at for now, but do note that I just had to take out the Stanford stats to make this presentation up to date, and that really broke my heart. So you might even be watching this, and in the wake of this decision, Stanford was your birthplace of choice, and now you don't have that. So I hope this kind of gives you some context of what else is out there for you. So again, these are kind of a rundown of hospitals of where to have a baby. We're going to go look at their stats as we go. Again, stats are part of the story. It's not the whole story, but it is part, and it's an important part to look at. We're going to look at cesarean, induction rates, and VBAC rates, because across the board, these are pretty good indicators of the health of a population. So you're going to notice in these stats, I did want to still include Stanford. It's going to be marked in red because that hospital is no longer, you know, providing for labor and delivery services, but I want you to see where their context was. They specialized in low risk deliveries. They didn't have 24-hour anesthesia, so they're never going to be getting a high risk mom, but they did a great job of keeping low risk people low risk. Shows up in these stats, but just keep in mind that big jump. So Stanford was kind of an outlier. It's no longer an option, but you can kind of see the other players and where they land. We still have, the big three hospitals in Lexington, UK, St. Joe, and Baptist. They are all up in that upper 30s, 40% rate, a little higher than what we know is healthy. But I do know all of these hospitals are working on reducing their cesarean rate. And also keep in mind that UK is kind of the epicenter of, any intense pregnancy situation or neonatal situation someone would have, if they're high risk maternal fetal medicine, they're probably going to be at UK. So their number is going to always be a little bit higher simply for that fact alone. They've got the NICU, they have the Children's Hospital, they have maternal fetal medicine specialists. That's going to be where very high risk people go. So always going to be a bit higher, but also note it's still kind of right there, 40, 39% with the others in the town. Um, and like I said, just keep in mind that these rates are, I think every hospital in Lexington, at least that I've spoken to in the last year, they all have kind of an initiative to reduce their C-section rate. St. Joe coming in at 33%, and then we kind of go on down from there. Again, that low risk C-section rate. So people who walk in with the lowest risk of needing a C-section, how many of those people come out with a C-section? It's better. These are getting closer to that healthy people 2020 goal of 23%. Still a little elevated. But again, we know that there are some cesarean prevention measures in place. And we'll talk at the end about some ways you can kind of help keep yourself healthy. Of course, hiring a doula is one of those. Trying to be as involved with your healthcare as possible is one. Asking good questions, asking your provider, when do you go back for a C-section? How do you help keep low risk people low risk? Knowing how to advocate for yourself, knowing how to get second opinions. Those are all ways to help reduce your own risk of a C-section if you wouldn't otherwise need one. And then we see induction rates. I do want to note this number is incredibly high. This is what the state reported. I have an inside contact at St. Joe, and she has told me that she thinks that number is wrong based on their internal records, but I reported it here because that's what I had access to. But if you're, looking at St. Joe, go ask your office, how many inductions do you do? Is that number, is 81% super high? Is that about right? Do you think there's a miscalculation? But again, everywhere else, inductions are pretty standard. About half of pregnancies are going to conclude via induction. I would say I've seen that in my practice as well. Maybe a little less, a little more, just depends, the year, I guess, and what's going on. As birth workers, we do know a lot of these trends come in cycles. So there's where induction rates are. And I'm hoping, again, seeing these numbers, I hope it also gives you some just clarity. When you're walking in, making your birth plan, you can kind of know, okay, here's this place I'm looking at. Here's what the numbers tell me. But also remember these numbers might be, these are hospital-wide numbers. You really need to ask your doctor, hey, I really don't want an induction if I don't have to have one. What is your induction rate? How many people in your office conclude their pregnancy via an induction? How will we help avoid that unless it's medically necessary? Those are great questions you can ask to boost your chances of having a spontaneous birth or boost your chances of having a really clear framework to understand when your pregnancy does need to conclude by an induction, which certainly, as a doula, I have seen a lot. Sometimes, whether for medical or just personal reasons, people need or want inductions, and they should have great ones. They should have really positive, empowering births no matter what's happening. So these are just numbers to keep in mind, make decisions. But I would say most, that exception of Stanford has always been the outlier. Everyone else pretty much in the same mix. Again, VBAC rates. This is one Stanford did not have a lot of because they did not have 24-hour anesthesia. Their policy was not to accept people attempting a VBAC. There was kind of an unspoken understanding of you can just show up in labor and we'll deal with that then. But they weren't really, because they didn't have a 24-hour anesthesia offering in the hospital, they couldn't openly, I guess, kind of support a VBAC. I think it was something you can actively plan, but if you show up in labor and you've had a previous surgery, we're not going to turn you away kind of thing. But you can, again, kind of see across the board where everybody else is with regard to their VBAC support. This is another really, really great conversation if you've had a prior cesarean or even if you've had any kind of surgery on your uterus not involving pregnancy. Great conversation to have with your individual provider of how do you help people who've had a surgery before? How do you help people with a scar on their uterus have a vaginal birth? We know that many people who attempt a VBAC are going to be successful at one. So how do we help, get that number where it should be? How do we help people have as much opportunity? And this just means these percentages of VBACs means that of people who've had a previous C-section or scar on their uterus, what percent of those people had a VBAC? So I hope that makes sense. And again, in the summary you're going to get, all these will be laid down. And I'm going to show you actually what my kind of summary document looks like in just a minute. Let's talk about birth amenities though. What do hospitals offer to help you have a comfortable birth? Think things like pain relief options, hydrotherapies, or water showers. Are they friendly to movement? Do they monitor you? So again, pain relief. Do you think medical and or mechanical forms? So mechanical, non like medicine might be like a peanut ball. Do we have birth balls, that sort of thing? Hydrotherapy, water. Is there an inflatable tub for use? Is there a tub tied to a room? Is there showers? If you need a monitoring, can you use them? Those are some questions to ask. Movement. Do we recommend moving in labor? Does the hospital have kind of some restrictive policies, perhaps movement, like if your water breaks, you can't get out of bed? I don't see that a lot, but some providers still might practice that way. You should ask them. Um, and then again, monitoring, do you typically monitor continuously or intermittently? Many hospitals have at least, like, if nothing else, a 20-minute NST admission, like non-stress test. What happens after that? Do you have to do the admission test? These are going to be really individual to you and your situation, but also with monitoring, one thing you can ask is, does the hospital have wireless or telemetry monitoring? You see, this is me 10 years ago having my second baby. I'm connected there to the monitor. Many hospitals in the area now do have wireless options, which is really helpful. Like maybe you need or want continuous monitoring, but can you move around? Or again, do we have skills and Doppler intermittent auscultation? I'm going to show you really quickly what this guide would look like that you're going to get with this class. And this is just a PDF. You'll get it as a PDF. This is just my kind of chart of what's going on in the region. There's those percents again with descriptions of how I got the numbers. If you want to check it yourself, or again, ask your doctor or your midwife, whoever you're seeing, hey, this number is here. Is that um, right? Again, so we see kind of pain relief, hydrotherapy, movement friendly, fetal monitoring broken down. I have noted if they have a wireless or untethered monitor, whether or not I know for sure, but just at all these options, kind of look around and see what applies to you, see what hospitals close, how far would you want to drive, what is really important to you in this list of things to have. Also, I tried to include, we'll get into this in a second in the presentation, but I tried to include what kind of provider would be attending you in that space. Again, while we're thinking about Stanford closing down, one unique thing about them is they did have family doctors who would attend births. They're not there anymore, but it's that was one thing. There could be some family docs around still, but I would say in the area, most are going to have OBGYNs, nurse midwives, or professional midwife. Another thing I really like to ask, or another thing I really like to tell people to ask about when you're evaluating where to have a baby is, how friendly is this practice or provider to doulas? Here's kind of a scale that I have made up from 1 to 5. And you can sort of also imagine that the more tolerant they are of doulas is also kind of a hint of how tolerant might that person be for your individual birth options. Doulas are received so differently in so many different places. And I think that a through line I have seen is people who are very comfortable with doula care are also pretty comfortable with giving you true informed consent. They're comfortable with you refusing care or a part of care, or at least they would say, hey, that doesn't make me feel great, but I'll honor your wish, sign this form, and we'll kind of move forward and check in at different points, something like that. I kind of have the scale of, you can see skeptical and intolerant. That would mean maybe they're not totally sure, but they'll kind of like deal with it. To the very end of that extreme would be like people who are actively discouraging doula use, and then welcoming and supporting. To welcoming and supportive would be, we love doulas. Here's a list of doulas that we like working with. Here's, please have a doula. Everyone on the floor loves seeing them come in. That would be kind of welcoming and supportive. I think many people are kind of in the middle, like, meh, it's okay, whatever you want to do. Sure, we'll tolerate a doula. But you can really see, is that important to you? Do you want a doula? Or at least do you want kind of a way to test the waters and see how supportive will this practice be for my unique birth wishes? The discussion of doulas is a great litmus test for that. So, okay, so now thinking a little bit about home birth, this is kind of the area again I'm looking at, Central Kentucky. You can have a home birth. There are midwives all in this area who would attend you. No birth centers yet, but I'm sure that's coming. I really like to tell people to go to Kentucky Home Birth Coalition, or it's now called KentuckyBirthCoalition.com. They have an active map of certified providers, providers in the area who are getting certified. Also note that there could be some non-licensed providers who might be practicing that's not reflected on this map. These are folks who would be connected, with the Kentucky Board of Nursing. They're licensed either as professional midwives or nurse midwives. They're kind of checked in of like, yes, I'm in this area, I'm practicing. You have oversight over me. I can kind of register myself on this site and provide care to patients. Um, this is a great site. It's crazy. I should have put in the first slide I had just a couple years ago when I did this presentation for the first time. There was maybe like 5 little dots on this map, and now there's so many. It does make me feel excited that home birth is growing. Community birth is growing, and a hospital birth. There's it's always a road to integrate into the system. Some people in this community don't know if they want to be integrated into like a medical system or kind of a public health system. And that's certainly, somebody's right to choose that decision. But I think it's exciting in the sense of if we want more folks to have more birth options, we need to put it out there, make it public. We have nothing to hide. Here's our rules we follow. Here's how you can check up on me. So I think it's very exciting that all these midwives have raised their hands and say, yes, I want to practice. I want you to be able to follow what I do, want people to find me easily. And I hope over time we're going to see more hospital, community birth integration, collaboration, people just knowing, okay, I'm here, you're there. We both provider types take care of families and give them the best birth. And that's really the goal. So I would say keep in mind when you're planning a home birth or birth center birth, when we get them any kind of community birth, I think it's a good idea for you to do a little bit more of your own research in terms of checking in the person that you want to be using. Do they have a lot of reviews? There's several private Facebook groups you might could join that have some pretty open and honest reviews about midwives, especially if you're planning a home birth. I highly recommend you do that. You need to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. You need to know if everybody's saying, oh, this one person they, whatever, they don't carry this type of equipment, or, they are always late to my appointments, or this midwife transfers really quickly, whatever it is, like you kind of need to know what you're getting. So I would just highly, highly encourage as much consumer advocacy on your part. Talk to the community, listen to what people say. There's several groups in here too, I think not listed. This is just one local to Lexington. I think it's like Cincinnati area home birth midwives has some providers in that attend in Lexington and Central Kentucky, but we're working on building, I think, a good consumer like feedback loop of okay, what's going on? And again, that this is another element of licensure. I think when people are licensed with the state, you can look up, has there ever been a complaint against this person? Are there any lawsuits pending? That kind of thing to keep you and your family safe. So while we're on that note, we're thinking about who could catch your baby. There's all types of people. Again, the kind of common family doctor option, which was the Stanford Birthing Spa, is as of now not an option anymore. There could be some family docs in the area that would have attend you in your pregnancy and birth. I don't know of any right now that were not associated with the Stanford Birth Spa, but this is kind of the breakdown. And you can kind of see too, midwives are going to be your experts in vaginal birth, low risk to moderate risk. Physicians are going to be more experts in high risk and surgical birth. They certainly can also handle moderate, low risk, but if we're wanting to think about what's their specialty, it's going to be higher risk people. Midwives are going to have a specialty in lower risk people, and they all kind of can meet in the middle. So CPM, I've said that name, certified professional midwife is a midwife who has just done training in midwifery through like a community birth lens. They practice in home and birth centers. A nurse midwife is someone who has a nursing license as well as a degree in nursing, and they can practice hospital or community birth. Again, family doctors, they can take care of the lifespan of the family from pediatrics to geriatrics. Some of them have done specialized training to do obstetrical, like maternity care. OBGYN, that's kind of the cultural norm, although that's certainly, it is good to note that OBGYNs are surgeons by training as well. So as a doctor, certainly there's some that are, many OBGYNs are still going to take care of vaginal births as well. There's some wonderful ones in the area. But just, remember that that training is more high risk. You might really have to ask some questions if you're a person who's wanting a low risk birth or a low intervention birth that you want an OBGYN, just ask, what's your philosophy of care, doctor so and so? How many C-sections do you do? Again, what is your vaginal birth rate? What do you think about birth? Do you think it's an emergency waiting to happen, or do you think it's normal until proven otherwise? That normal until proven otherwise is the midwifery model of care. But I would just say, in my experience, some OBGYNs have that perspective, but I think many, because they're just trained surgeons, many of them do kind of have more of a like, I'm expecting this to go wrong at some point. So I'm just prepared. And you can keep in mind, what works for you. What's your perspective of birth? And then finally, maternal fetal medicine specialist. This is like the highest high risk OBGYN. This would be your like preterm birth, babies with congenital abnormalities, babies with genetic conditions that might need to be managed in utero or directly after birth, moms with high risk conditions. This is your maternal fetal medicine. They have extra training. They're highly specialized for high risk. And again, I was hinting at this before, but I really love, use your visits to ask some questions, or better yet, even, so those visits can be short. Use your MyChart or patient portal to email your provider or the person you're interviewing and just ask, what's your philosophy of birth? How do you view medical interventions? Tell me, what does a positive birth look like for you? How do you navigate stressful situations? What do you do when a patient doesn't want to do a course of care you're recommending? Those are great get to know you questions that can help you see if you vibe with that provider or not. Or maybe it's the only, maybe you're with the provider and due to insurance or whatever reasons, this is the person you're going to take, that's going to be taking care of you, and you don't have other options. It is just good to know, where are they coming from? Where are you coming from? So you can meet, just meet somewhere in the middle, in the sense of communicate your needs. Perhaps they can communicate what they're looking for, and you guys can make a plan that works for everybody. This is certainly where doulas come in. This was my favorite part of being a doula, is helping people get that sweet spot of provider-patient relationship mix. But ultimately, families, you're going to have your own decisions in your healthcare. And I hope it's with you're with a provider who honors your own decision making, honors your intuition. But always reflect. How did this conversation go? How do these appointments go? Do I feel safe in my appointments? Do I feel like I never got listened to? Should I look for a different provider? Should I look for a different practice? Keep in mind too, some practices or most practices have a shared call model. So you might see one provider your whole pregnancy, but if you go into spontaneous labor, they may not be on call. So you should ask that, can I meet some other people in this practice? What does this practice feel like? Should I be with another practice, or does this one work? Or, again, if this is my option, do I just mentally need to check, okay, they might approach birth differently than I do. So what's my plan? How am I going to navigate that when it comes time to have my baby? Ultimately, of course, I believe you are the very best parent for your baby. You were chosen to be your baby's parent on purpose, for a purpose. And just as much as I think that birth is, of course, a life-changing, wonderful experience, I also want to encourage you that, if you don't quite get the birth that you would like, or maybe you've already had a baby and you're looking again and you're trying to change some things, birth is very foundational, but at the same time, it does not write your whole story. It's part of your story. You can learn a lot. You can learn a lot about how to be a parent. You can learn a lot about how to be a person through giving birth. And just as much as I've made that my life work and I love it, I just want to give you maybe some hope and encouragement that it is not the end all be all of your entire story of mothering or fathering or parenting, or engaging in your healthcare. Like, we change and we learn and we grow. Um, so at the end of the day, you're the best parent for your baby. You're the best you that you can be at the time, with who you are and with what you know. And birth it's truly, I think, of course, wonderful, magical. foundational, but it's not your whole story. So if you've had an unsatisfying birth, or perhaps now you're in a situation where you're thinking, gosh, I'm with this provider, I don't love it, but it's really my only option. I just want you to believe it's possible that it can be better than you're expecting. And with hopefully some of this knowledge and information and decision making, you can make it a positive experience. So that's all I have for right now. Like I said, I've been Motherwell doula in that area for 10 years. I'm currently in nursing school, on the road to being a labor nurse, and then midwife hopefully in the future. So not taking clients, but I am just here as a resource and a guide. If you have any other questions for me, motherwelldoula.com. You can always connect with me there, on Instagram, Motherwell Doula. I also have a workbook that I've created. This was something for doulas, although certainly parents can use it. It's a template. You can open it up in Canva and just create your own birth plan. It's a guide. It's really going to walk you step by step through this process that I've hinted at. And certainly that's there for you. It's kind of my gift to you. You can go to motherwelldoula.com/workbook. That's sort of everything I have learned in the last 10 years of being a doula, I'll put in one place. So I hope that that is helpful. And thank you for watching this little training. Again, if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me, motherwelldoula.com or at motherwelldoula on Instagram. And I just wish you a happy, healthy pregnancy, a beautiful birth, and I hope you have a very fulfilling life as a parent.